Hello, hello. Welcome to the place for offbeat health professionals who have bravely swapped their healthcare hats for non-clinical creative caps. I'm Caitlin, a psychologist turned copywriter, and this is Healers with Hustles. Hello, healers. So today is the second episode or second part to the brand voice episode that I did last week. So maybe go back and listen to that if you haven't already. But today I'll be talking about the 9 voice types in a bit more depth and give a few examples of what they are. All right, let's dive in. So there's 9 voices, 3 voices in each. The first category is the voices of authority. The voices of authority lead with expertise, and they're seen as the absolute authority on a matter, making them perfect for industries that want a strong or knowledgeable presence. And these are the voices that you could imagine if you're at a conference, they'd be lecturing up on the stage and be commanding people's attention. Voice number 1 under this category is the translator. So the translator, as you can probably guess, is all about making complex topics simple. The voice takes challenging topics and breaks them down for everyday people to understand. Then the tone is quite empathetic, the cadence is short, and the vocab is pretty basic. A good example of someone who uses this type of voice is, say, Bill Nye, the science guy, or Neil deGrasse Tyson, who explain scientific, complex topics in a way that is accessible and even children can understand. So really, a translator voice is great for an audience that might feel overwhelmed by complex topics, or they're seeking something that's really clear, simplified, or maybe people who are wanting to learn a little bit more about an industry that they don't have any prior knowledge of. It's a new subject. Next up in the authority subtype is the parent or the auntie, because sometimes people are a bit about parents. So the auntie acts really as a voice of experience, saying that I've been where you are and I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. So they have that real nurturing vibe to them. They're cautionary, but they're empathetic, and they share a lot of their experiences. So the cadence is a medium and the vocab is generally pretty basic. Oprah Winfrey is an example of this voice. So who shares life's lessons and wisdom and with her audience in a caring and supportive manner. Brands could be, say, Dove are an example of this brand. And maybe even in terms of a therapy example, Brene Brown might fit here as well, because Brene shares a lot of insights on her experience. She uses her experience as a way to explain her research. And then the third voice in this category is the voice of God, which is a voice I don't really like writing for because it reminds me too much of writing academic papers. But hey, so unlike the translator or the parent, the God voices, they're not trying to make the complex simple. They're actually doing the opposite. They want to present complex information without diluting it, and they expect their reader to be able to keep up. This type of voice can be quite helpful in industries where someone has a lot of credentials or they want to be seen as quite authoritative and show their expertise. So often there's a serious tone, they have longer sentences and really advanced vocab. A good example potentially is like any academic journals or maybe even some medical companies. And the audience for this voice that is quite helpful would be some type of professionals, depending, academics, and anyone that really respects authority and complex topics. People who want detailed, thorough, sophisticated information. All right, now the second type of category is the voice of accessibility. So the voices of accessibility are more approachable and relatable, and they want to make topics enjoyable and easy to understand. So these are the brands that will be sitting down in the audience and giving a speech, or maybe even sitting somewhere where there's only a small group of people, so it's a bit more intimate. And so in this category, there's first up the friends at the bar. So the friends at the bar is a bit like talking to your friend about something cool you just discovered. So it's really casual, engaging, might use slang and filler words. A good example, I was trying to think of an example in terms of therapy, and I thought of potentially Laurie Voice in her book, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, who shares like a lot of her experiences, but the idea is to make therapy more approachable and conversational in an engaging way. Another example is probably Hamish and Andy, who are Australian radio and TV personalities. So they're known for their casual and humorous and engaging style. Other brands could be like M&M's or potentially even Duolingo and Ryanair. They're definitely about engaging their audience and being more relatable. This type of voice, or who do well, or brands who do well with an audience who are looking for maybe more relaxed and informal approach to learning or engaging with brands. Maybe people who are seeking entertainment, relatable advice, and maybe that sense of like camaraderie or friendship or being a part of, maybe a sense of community is a good way to put it. And next up in the voice of accessibility category is learning as we go. So this voice is really about curiosity and exploration and being in the middle of learning something. So it's a little bit similar to the parent because it's about their experiences, but they're in the midst of their experiences. They're not on the other side just yet. And so the tone is generally curious. The cadence is quite long because they're still working things out. So they might ramble a little bit and then get to their point at the end of the sentence. So I think Healers with Hustles is definitely in a learning as we go phase because I'm still working out what the brand is and what the podcast particularly is. And then another example I was thinking of, potentially Rick Stein, who often in his content explores new recipes or goes overseas and learns about cooking and then makes it on the go. And it's often he kind of makes mistakes and he's very, very open. It's all about getting viewers to learn along with him. Audiences who could do well with this voice are people who are maybe enjoy the process of learning and discovery or being with someone as they're witnessing something new, experiencing something new. So that might be hobbyists or lifelong learners or just anyone, like I said, who experience the journey of exploration. The last one in the voices of accessibility, the yogi or the mystic. And so these people, as you could imagine, the brands are quite gentle and calming. Often it's a tone that's a voice that's often used in the self-help or life coaching space. And the voice is really all about focusing how something feels or the transformation in their self rather than tangible outcomes. So it's all about learning about your higher self and spirituality, that kind of thing. And so you can imagine any type of wellness brand is often uses this style of voice. Audiences does well with this type of voice are people seeking inner peace, maybe like that personal growth, interested in spirituality, that holistic well-being. Now onto the third and final category are the voices of outlook. So these voices of outlook are defined by their unique perspectives on the world. So it's more about like how they view the world rather than how their audience views them. And so these brands, you could imagine if they were giving a speech, they'd be the ones like walking through the audience. So first up in this category, we've got the underdog. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. So the underdog is really a hopeful but confident voice. And really it's about preparing for that uphill battle. They know they're fighting a losing battle, but they're trying anyway. So they're hopeful about the outcome. So generally a good example of the voice would be any hero in a Disney film or any hero in a film. So potentially like Harry Potter as he goes up against Lord Voldemort. The tone is generally one that's a little bit hopeful, optimistic, resilient, but it might even include a bit of like humor or something like that. Generally the underdog voice can be helpful for audiences who might feel marginalized or they're facing significant challenges, or maybe they're looking for a little bit of motivation potentially to overcome obstacles. Next, we've got anti-establishment voice, which is a voice that's all about challenging the norm. And they often have bold and unconventional perspectives. There is a bit of a misconception. So anti-establishment voice doesn't need to be aggressive or anything, but for some reason that's often what clients fear, is that having an anti-establishment voice means they're like angry and aggressive and like, but no, it's definitely not like that. I would actually think that like Healers brand has a tinge of anti-establishment because it is all about trying to challenge the status quo or the perception of what health professionals are or what they do. I just gave it away the next one, but often the anti-establishment and eternal optimists are a good combo together. But the anti-establishment is a little bit like F the status quo vibe. So an example is potentially The Chaser. So the Australian satirical comedy legends, their tagline even is striving for mediocrity in a world of excellence. So very anti-establishment. An opposite, a good example would be an opposite voice. So Voice of God, their tagline would be striving for excellence in a world of mediocrity. Generally, anti-establishment brands do well with for audiences who are maybe like disillusioned with conventional norms and want an alternative perspective. Anyone who's maybe drawn to innovative and unconventional ideas. Apple at one stage was quite anti-establishment. It's not really now because it's quite mainstream. And then the final one, which I gave away before, is Eternal Optimist. The Eternal Optimist is, as you can imagine, it's all about positivity and uplifting and focusing on spreading positivity and inspiration. But that doesn't mean the voice shies away from deep or complex or tough topics. It's just that the undertone in what they're saying is things are going to be okay. Eternal Optimist brands, they generally love an exclamation mark or an emoji. Eternal Optimist. It's a fun voice to write with. Michelle Obama would be potentially an example of this voice. So in her speeches, so she was about like uplifting and inspiring people with a hopeful outlook. Or potentially I was thinking even Play School or Bluey would be an example of Eternal Optimist. So this voice is generally good for audiences who might feel down, a bit hopeless, and they're really hoping for positivity and encouragement. Often the anti-establishment and Eternal Optimist are a good combo together. All right, so there you have it. That's the 3 categories. So the voices of authority, of which is the translator, the parent or auntie, and then the voice of God. And then the second category is voices of accessibility, which is friends at the bar, learning as we go, and the yogi or mystic. And then the final category is the voices of outlook, and they are the underdog, anti-establishment, and the Eternal Optimist. And so I want to say I didn't make these up. I learned this from the wonderful Justin Blackman and Jill Hill from Brand Voice Academy. I'll pop their website in the show notes so you can have a look. And they even have a good freebie. Definitely check that out. And thank you so much for joining me in this second parter. All right. That's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Healers with Hustles. If you've enjoyed today's episode, will you do me a tiny favor and subscribe to the show? Just tap the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform and you'll be the first to know as soon as a new episode drops. Thanks so much for listening. Okay, ta-ta for now.